Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest on what is still looking like a May general election, as Theresa May becomes the biggest name to announce that she can't be bothered losing her seat in the upcoming general election. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So yeah, International Women's Day, I'm afraid the best I've got for you is Theresa May. Sorry about that. But everything is still shaping up for a May 2nd general election. There are still signs of the Tories leaving themselves the option of a later election, but I think the plan is still May. In reality, I think April would, in theory, be better for them, but, you know, there's problems with that. More about that another time, maybe. But Rishi Sunak is now refusing to repeat his previous line that his working assumption was an election in the second half of the year, given that other Tory MPs have been keen to persuade people that the election is not happening this spring. It seems odd that the person who actually decides won't even stick by what he was saying a few months ago. So I would advise working on the basis that the election is going to be on May the 2nd. And speaking of May, Theresa May is the latest rat to jump the sinking ship. With many Tory MPs stepping down, I've supposed that, you know, they just don't fancy being in opposition. But Theresa May has effectively been in opposition ever since Boris Johnson took over. Because for all her faults, and they are manifold, May was clearly appalled at a lot of what Johnson did to her party. I've never really considered the Conservative Party to have ever acted in the national interest, but there was a time when they believed they were. Not since Johnson, they're just a band of pirates now. So I don't think May will ever have thought of herself as being part of the party of power anyway. But then she has to take responsibility for that as well. She promoted Boris Johnson, knowing he was unsuitable. She instigated the Brexit red lines, knowing they were deeply damaging to the country. I'm not saying she had a free hand in Brexit strategy. You know, I understand that political leaders they're not autocrats. You know, whoever had been in charge would have been held hostage to an extent by the UKIP infiltrators, and we do not know what she had to promise behind closed doors in order to become leader to prevent Johnson doing so. But she clearly had no plan to steer the country or even her party through Brexit. You know, I got the impression she was putting party ahead of country all the time. She wanted to act to stop her party splitting over Brexit. Didn't work. Her red lines essentially invited the mess which followed, made it impossible to find a form of Brexit that wasn't going to be deeply damaging for both our economic and political system. Even today, I'll still see the odd comment from some people who say, it was folly to push for a second referendum on the terms of our exit, that Remainers should instead have tried to work with May on a more suitable form of Brexit. For me, this is on the same level as Tories saying they should never have ousted Johnson. There was no choice in the matter. Boris Johnson was going to be suspended, they couldn't not get rid of him, and Theresa May's red lines allowed for only one type of Brexit, leaving the customs union single market and creating constant political tension in Northern Ireland. To add to which, there was absolutely zero way that Theresa May was going to form any sort of consensus across the House that meant pissing off 100 of her own MPs. There was no way she was going to come to an accord with opposition MPs to counter that huge block within her own party, because that would have split her party, and that's what she was interested in, not the national interest, her own party interest. The only way of avoiding the hard Brexit we got was another referendum. Theresa May made it utterly impossible to find any other political solution. Indeed, she didn't even try. She refused to even talk to Labour about Brexit until she'd been suffering record defeats on her withdrawal agreement, and even then they were just for show. There was no offer of compromise on any issue. Her red lines made it impossible. And I note that her statement today says that she wants to spend more time working for the Global Commission on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking. I hope she does. I hope she does good work in this endeavour, because her hostile environment policy made a lot of people more vulnerable to slavery and trafficking in this country while she was Home Secretary, to say nothing of how much more vulnerable people have now become in the intervening years. So I suppose it's good that she will at least attempt to offer some atonement for her terrible performance in office. She's more than most of her colleagues. But there's no way of being able to describe May as essentially a decent person who was dealt a bad hand. You know, she looks good only compared to her successors and maybe her immediate predecessor. The best thing you can say about Theresa May is that she had some human feeling towards some people. High praise compared to the 5 Tory MPs we've had since 2010, but it's a very low bar. Mind you, the fact that she's standing down, that makes her constituency contest a little bit more interesting. Her seat of Maidenhead has been a very safe Tory seat. That is no longer the case. According to the MRP poll, which YouGov carried out a little while ago, the Lib Dems would be snapping at her heels. Now, an MRP poll does not take into account unusual local factors. It just takes into account the way certain types of voter are voting and how many of those types of voter in each constituency, right? So the popularity of local candidates, that is a factor that MRP can't take account of. And although Theresa May will have a lot of detractors across the country, I don't think she's going to be earning a lot of praise. Not so much in Maidenhead. By all accounts, she was a very good constituency MP. She put a lot of time and effort into her community. And because she will not be personally blamed for the sheer scale of the mess which has been caused from Boris Johnson onwards, given that she's actually spoken out against the behaviour at times, there is every chance that Theresa May would have held on to her seat. Wouldn't have been certain, because the potential for tactical voting is immense. But, you know, she may have had a decent chance of winning because people locally may have said, well, we don't really hate her. But what now? Unless the Conservatives find a candidate who is a well-known and well-liked champion of the community, people will now be voting for the party. They won't be voting for Theresa May because she's not there. They'll be voting for this nameless person we don't know, but who will be working for Rishi Sunak. So that's who they'll be thinking of. It'll be voting along lines of the National Party again. And I would suggest that May standing down has probably made her constituency more likely to flip now. And if the election is in May, the local Conservatives haven't got long because they haven't got a candidate. I wonder how many more will be announcing their retirement over the next week or so as well. Apparently, when The Guardian queried the sheer number of Tory MPs standing down, a minister said, oh, well, you're not ready. I think there's about 50 Labour MPs standing down as well. It's like, no, mate, there's 17. Even taking into account the fact that there are way more Conservative MPs than Labour MPs, no, there's way more Tory MPs stepping down, even proportionally. And in most cases, it really is because they can't be asked, either putting up with the abuse on the campaign trail only to be told to sling their hook at 3 a.m. in a sports hall, or they're in a safe seat, they will win, but they just don't want to be in opposition. They can't make any money in opposition. Most Tory MPs have only been in Parliament when it was relatively easy to win their seats. Very few sitting Tory MPs knew what life was like in Parliament before 2010. They've only known being on the government benches. You know, so they had a relatively easy time winning their seats. So easy that even a chimp like Gullis could do it last time round. Once they can no longer lobby ministers for lucrative deals, not interested. Now, Theresa May will be one of the few who can make a decent claim to be standing down for more usual reasons. She's been in Parliament for nearly 30 years. Her political career has already peaked. She's clearly not getting back into government. In fact, it's actually quite unusual for former prime ministers to hang around at all. They usually bugger off straight away. You know, their own party usually prefers it if they do bugger off once they've fallen. So fair play in a sense for sticking it out this long. And yet, the fact of her announcing her imminent departure at this late stage just adds fuel to the idea that the rats are abandoning ship. It draws attention to the fact that there are over 60 Tory MPs standing down, if you count those who are currently classed as independent but they won their seats as Conservative candidates. You know, people like Matt Hancock and Crispin Blunt. In fact, there are nearly as many Tory MPs stepping down for this election than there were MPs of all parties at the last election. And the announcements are probably not even finished. And you do find that the number of MPs retiring peaks during an election year when it's fairly obvious that the government is changing. The two greatest numbers of retirements, if going back right back to 1955, the greatest number of retirements by far were in 1997 and 2010, both years where a long-term government was clearly going to crash and burn. The current number stepping down, according to the House of Commons website, if we add Theresa May on, is 96. That will be the third highest if it stays as it is. Mind you, it's worth noting we've also had a significant number of MPs step down during the course of the Parliament, didn't want to hang on to the election. So yeah, maybe May's one great act of service will be to heap more pressure on the Tories on her way out. I'm not going to comment too much on the fact that her departure may also mean making it harder for her local party to win. I think that's the case, but that is just speculation on my part. It is also possible that the tactical vote would be even more motivated in order to see her crying one last time the morning after the general election. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.